CS greetings, CSGOs. This is a CSGO show, and it's called Forgotten Realms. I'm Xtremes, and with me is Draulon and Bleh. And we're really excited to talk about things going on in the scenes around the world in CSGO that maybe don't necessarily get spoken about in podcasts all that much. So I'm really excited to be here. How are you guys doing?
I'm fine. Well. Thanks for having me on this show.
Cool. Well, Blair, we don't hear the rain in the background anymore, so that's a good step in the right direction.
Yeah, that's a good thing, right? I have literally no soundproofing in my room because I rarely cast from here. So it was like crazy thunderstorms and shit. So hopefully, won't really affect this podcast. And if it does, like we said earlier, atmosphere.
Atmosphere
is always good. Yeah.
Metal album cover. You need the rain behind you while you chill with your guitar.
Absolutely, some thunder and lightning and whatnot. But yeah, I'm good to be here. I'm pretty happy to be here, and I think it's going to be a pretty interesting, at least an hour of talk over some pretty more obscure scenes in Counter-Strike, so to speak.
Absolutely, Draulon. You're in Europe, but you're on the side of Europe that's maybe a little bit less known than some others.
Oh yeah, mate. I'm the warden of the East. so always on the eastern side of Europe. But yeah, I mean, it is always nice to be the one getting asked questions from instead of me asking questions from others for a change. That's always welcome.
Absolutely. So if you're the warden of the East, does that make Thorin the king in the North?
Absolutely. That's a good one, by the way.
Let's not give him ideas.
Yeah, let's not give him ideas, actually. He's got enough blasted to sort of last enough podcasts to the end of time, basically. But he's a character, love him, absolutely love him. So I think maybe just for viewers who don't know who we are, we'll quickly just explain from each of our sides what we actually do in the CSGO scene. I'll start since I'm talking right now. I am a CSGO caster in South Africa. Amazingly, you wouldn't think it looking at me, but yes, South Africa. I do work for ESL, currently doing the ESL Southeast Europe Championship, which is the Balkan regions, involved with a lot of local stuff, ESL Africa as well, and I do quite a lot of podcasts, not necessarily video podcasts, but I do the IGN Africa podcast, which is popular for Africa. It's the most popular here, but the rest of the world, probably very tiny numbers in comparison. But yeah, I write for publications as well. So very involved in CSGO and hoping to take it further. Mr. Draulon, tell us about what you do.
Right. So most people probably know me for like my content, which I do at Unicorn. It's a esports wagering and news site. And yeah, so mostly content, and I'm also a bit of like a support player for the social media team over there, helping them out with this and that. And more recently, I have joined BIG, Berlin International Gaming, where I also do like content and social media, help them with some of their editorial stuff. So I'm basically dabbling in almost every part of the industry right now, which is always fun because you get to learn a lot of new things, you get to meet a lot of cool people. So right now it's mostly a learning process, but I guess that most people would know me for my content, so interviews, articles, more recently podcasts and stuff, and that's pretty much me.
You also desk hosted V4 Future Esports Festival, right?
Yeah. So that was basically my debut as a actual analyst, even though I was pretty much hosting the desk there, which came as some surprise, but obviously that's something I am also planning to do more frequently in the future. You can never tell for sure because broadcast life is, you get what you pay for, right? So you never know what's coming your way. But that's also something that hopefully I get to do more of in the coming months.
Absolutely. Blair?
I'm the... what do I do? I started casting like a few years back, right? Like about 5 years back when no one's really casting the Asian scene. There were like lots of teams. Like you had these Vietnamese teams like Skyred, Tai Lu was coming out and all these guys. No one's really covering them. So I thought I'd just, probably give it a shot and just kind of like specialize in the Asian scene where now, or, in the recent past, at least a couple of years back, I used to get invited for the Asian minors and whatnot whenever there's like Asian teams over there as an analyst. And now more recently, I've kind of like transitioned into more like, the EU teams, the NA teams, so like for events like DreamHack Open and whatnot. So kind of like caster / analyst, also work for So Strong in India, like where it's kind of like the Faceit ESCA for Asia, so to speak, for those who don't know that. So I kind of like help them with business related stuff and whatnot. They dabble a bit in production as well. So yeah, like we say in the business, right? You do what's given. Although I want to be a play-by-play caster, I'm stuck being an analyst, but then I love it as well. So yeah.
I know the feels, man. It is the worst when you want to be on the broadcast and you're happy to be on the broadcast, but you want to do that other thing.
Oh yeah.
It's just what it is, but you know.
I mean, look at Machine, right? He wants to cast, like he's a play-by-play, right? And he's stuck. He's just unfortunately stuck, probably being the best, desk host in esports. That's so tragic.
What a curse, being the best.
What a curse.
Shame. I feel for him, but also not in just a little way, because he does get to work all the very cool events, and he is so freaking good at it, man.
That is true.
I'd love to hear him cast again because he is great at it. But yeah, the ability that he has on the desk compared to anyone else to get the best out of his analysts, he is a master at that.
He's a natural.
Yeah, okay, so if Machine is watching this, now he knows we like him. So let's actually hit some topics. Let's start with Asia, and probably the juiciest topic this week is Fierce Tiger. And I'm going to go over to you, Mr. Bleh, because I'm sure you've got a thing or two to say. Your tweets have been especially savage around this.
Can I swear on this podcast?
Do it.
Like, yeah, all right. What a fucking shit show, right? Like, what a fucking shit show that was. Here's the thing. The sad part is if these were players who most people didn't know about, I think most people really wouldn't be surprised about it. Because let's be honest, right? Chinese CS, I've been hearing rumors and whatnot for years now as to how corrupt the entire thing over there is. I'm not just talking about, players not having a good salary or being stuck in like ridiculous contracts and whatnot, but also when it comes to the match fixing, match throwing and whatnot. It's not just the players involved. I know, I've been told from some pretty reliable sources that some of the more well-known, I won't drop any names, but some very well-known orgs in China who are involved in multiple esports titles have a very shady history when it comes to Counter-Strike Global Offensive, right? So it's a kind of a very corrupt scene, so to speak, what's happening in Asian CS, primarily in China, because that's where all the money is, when it comes to Asian Counter-Strike. But the Fierce Tiger thing, which really surprised me, was that the fact that Savage and TB was involved in it, right? These are two guys who are legends, so to speak, when it comes to Asian Counter-Strike. Back from 1.6, Savage was a very, very well-known player. He has, of course, waned off late, struggled a bit, and then he got, him and TB got removed from the entire shuffle that happened between VG Gaming and Flash Gaming. So, I mean, they're a really good team, but this entire thing about fielding a backband player, then making him play on a Smurf account for the Asia minor, and then this entire thing about cutting wires, the IRL DDoS. I mean, what the fuck are you guys up to, right? And then what sort of an org does that? And I guess all of you guys have seen even the email chain which they shared with Chad between Faceit and whatnot. Yep. I mean, that's oh my word. The threats and such bullshit, right? They're like, oh, the player's on vacation right now, we can't have the rematch. I'm like, for fuck's sake, for crying out loud. Wait, I mean, what else can you say about them, to be very honest? I mean, I leave it to you guys, because this is ridiculous in my eyes.
Go for it, John.
I mean, when this whole Fierce Tiger thing first came out, I was like, I read through it once, but didn't pay a lot of attention to it, because it's like, just another day in China, in the Chinese scene, right? So you got some shady shit going on, you got some match fixing and stuff like that. So, but then when things got to like the whole wire cutting thing, it's like, Jesus Christ, like there's obvious foul play going on here. So I started paying more attention. And I mean, this is like a perfect example of what's wrong with the Chinese scene at the moment, right? Because it's just so shady and so unregulated. For example, I know that a lot of bookmakers, for example, they just don't touch Chinese matches, because even if it's like a more prestigious league with teams that like some of the top teams in the Asian scene playing, they still won't offer odds for it, because it's just you can't trust those games, right? There's like no way in hell. So that's kind of sad as well, because it just comes to show that even at the very top level, the Chinese scene is still experiencing these problems. And right now, like I'm not really sure like how we can possibly mend this or fix this, because right now I feel like the change has to come from within. So like I think Richard Lewis had this in his podcast, his episode on the whole Fierce Tiger thing, which is a brilliant title, by the way. It's like crouching tiger, hidden bush or something like that. I fucking loved it.
Yeah.
And he said like obviously the Chinese scene, like they won't succumb to like Western pressure. They won't, the Western authorities like won't go to China and say like we need this and this and this done, like regulated, because the Chinese scene just won't do that, right? So I feel like for things to change in the Chinese scene, like there has to be change from within. And how this would look like, and obviously I think the best example would be like, I think probably Bleh and you axtremes also know about this, like the whole NDO project that Volcan is doing. Like he's basically trying to build like a beacon of consistency within the Chinese scene, right? So he's not looking to like assemble a team of star players. He's importing some experienced players from Europe and building out a trustworthy and consistent organization in like the heart of China, which finally allows like these players from the Chinese scene which have potential a place where they can compete and they can actually evolve as a players without having to worry about, is my internet going to get cut? Am I going to be like, winged by some Chinese mafia? Am I going to be caught up in some match fixing? So that's something that is a step in the right direction.
Yeah, I completely agree with him on that. But like, just to add to that would be the fact that despite Vulcan trying what he can, right? I think he's been facing a lot of troubles with the Chinese red tape, and also most orcs not being very happy about his project, so to speak, right? But yeah, I do agree. And here's the thing: we need the scene to grow, because Counter-Strike CS:GO is great. I mean, it's massive. I think, in my opinion, not trying to be biased or anything, but I think it's the easiest esports for people to get into when it comes to the mainstream, right? For people to get picked up. And if you look at League of Legends, if you look at Dota 2, the reason those two games are big is because of the Korean and the Chinese market, right? So even if you leave Korea aside, because Korea has their own things going, if we can get some success story coming out from China, like one big team performing well, like two teams reaching out of the playoffs in a major, for example, that can actually rejuvenate this love for CS, which is always there in China for a long time, even at 1.6, right? And if that happens, we can get that massive player base to start paying attention to the scene and start investing more into the game. This could be almost like a second life, so to speak, for Counter-Strike. Not that CS is dying or anything, but it can be a huge boost for the industry. But unfortunately, because of these match fixing incidents, all these shady orcs, and on top of that, like, even if you look at, I've always called this out every time I see it, but if you look at some of the streaming numbers you see from some of these Chinese platforms, so right? They're like, 20 million people watch a major front. Like, fuck off, get out of here. Right? Like, come on. I mean, that's the thing. I think it's so shady at all levels when it comes to the broadcasting, when it comes to some of the players, the orgs, and everything, right? And I think, what Vulcan's doing is, I agree with you, Draulon, that it is a step in the right direction, but we still need more to be done to kind of like turn things around. But like I said, I don't know how it's going to happen, because it's China. They don't give a shit about what everyone else is going to say.
I think the most dangerous thing about this whole Fierce Tiger thing is that if you're like a new player to this team, say like a 16, 17-year-old player who sees like all these tournaments, and you want a piece of that pie as well, right? You want to go out there and prove that you are among the best. And then you take a look at the Chinese scene, the scene that you will be competing in, and what you see is like players getting like there's physical action involved, right? Someone goes out and cuts your internet cable, like there are just like shady people involved, match fixing, all that jazz. Like, if you're a young player, like, you will be like scared shitless, right? You don't want to get involved with that. It's just like you don't need a stress in your life. So that whole thing being present in the Chinese scene is actively discouraging like the younger players to go out there and want to compete, because if I would be like a young player and I wouldn't want to get involved with it at all. It's like, fuck that shit. I'm not going out there and getting involved with like all these shady organizations that just trying to like either get money out of me or use me to make some more money.
Yeah, it's a scary place. Two things I'd like to touch on there. Number one, congratulations to the Chinese scene for figuring out how to DDoS people the analog way as opposed to doing it, the good old-fashioned digital way. Even here in South Africa, we've had tournaments DDoSed in the past. Nobody like came and cut cables or anything. China, they're doing it old school. A history of thuggery going back thousands of years, I guess.
Pretty badass. Yeah,
it's pretty badass. So I got to say, you got to have massive balls to try pull that off. Imagine the whole thing. This dude trying to break into their gaming house compound and cut the cables. It was probably some kind of like secret agent shit, guys.
It's insane.
It's insane.
It's the whole calling their provider, like trying to figure out where the cables are in the first place. It's just like it's so deliberately done. It's actually crazy, like how they planned it all out.
Yeah, there must have been some research involved. A couple of palms were greased with some money there to maybe provide information. It's just, if you think about the logistics, it's the craziest thing. This was obviously like right from the very beginning something that they were planning to do. The other thing that's interesting to me about the Chinese CS:GO scene is there's this game they've got called Crossfire Stars. I don't know if you guys have seen it. It's like a CS:GO ripoff.
Yeah, I played this, right?
Yeah, it's got like, it even has art assets and sounds from 1.6, which is really like, well, it's very Chinese, isn't it? It's a rip-off game. And apparently it's got a huge following. Do you guys think maybe that's also an obstacle that CSGO has to overcome? Because it's essentially a Chinese CS that's in all their on people's computers and at the internet cafes, that sort of thing.
I think it comes down to like it's a very similar thing to the Korean scene. I feel like many of the players, like things are changing right now slowly and surely. But if you look at China, South Korea, even if you look at the rest of Southeast Asia, right, most of these kids, they don't really have great PCs at home to play games like CS:GO. Yeah, CS:GO it's a pretty old game, but still, you'd need a pretty decent rig to get that 300 FPS, right? So most of them wind up going to these PC bangs, as they call it in Korea, or like PC cafes, gaming cafes. It happened in Mongolia as well recently. Those, they shut down all gaming cafes and all that crap. But yeah, so what happens is, at least in China, I think these and Korea as well, these cafe owners, like they have a chain of cafes and such, right? And they have an agreement with probably the Crossfire publishers or whatnot, where they put this game in these PCs for free. And for these kids coming in, they're just going to sit there, all right, what's there to play? And there's going to be Dota, there's going to be League of Legends, and there's going to be Crossfire, right? And they will probably see CSGO over there. And that's why they play it. I really think that's the thing. If you look at Overwatch, for example, it's a paid game, right? It's a $60, $40 game. Yet, because it's there in all these PC banks in Korea, that's why it really took off, while that wasn't the case with many other games that happened. So I think it's a lot to do with the people to be very honest. And I like Crossfire's been there for a while, even the older versions as well. And I think this is the reason that it still sustains and that CS hasn't really made its way into the scene. But if Perfect World does a smart thing, and they kind of like, I'm just like talking on my ass here, to be honest, but if Perfect will actually, like, they manage to talk to these cafe owners, these chains and whatnot, right, and try and get CSGO pushed into these places, I think we might actually see people actually transitioning to that, alongside the success of teams like Vici Flash or Tyloo. I
personally think that it's actually a good thing that we have Crossfire out there, because first of all, it proves that there is an active audience in China for this kind of FPS title, right? So people are actually playing these type of games and they want to compete in them. Second is that, if you remember, actually, I think back in 1.6 maybe a bit like towards the end, Fallen actually competed in Crossfire, because the whole game when it became really popular in browser for a while, when like Counter-Strike was on the down low a bit, and because the price pools simply outweighed the ones in Counter-Strike. So a lot of people in the Brazilian scene, from what I understand, switched to Crossfire and competed in that for a while. And once Counter-Strike kind of came back into the meta, so to say, we had those big prize pool tournaments again, then they've switched back. So what I think is that once Counter-Strike becomes something in China that provides a better standard of living, so it's more it's worth it. Yeah, it's worth it more to play Counter-Strike than Crossfire. I can see a lot of more people switching over, and like you said, with the whole internet cafe things, like once they can actually, because I believe this version of the Perfect World client is free to play, right? So
yeah,
basically there shouldn't be like a lot of obstacles in actually getting this on LAN cafes. So once they can get this down, get the LAN cafes sorted out, I can actually see like an uptrend in like the Chinese player base, because you can already see that these gigantic tournaments coming to China, right? So these tournaments are already showing people that there's massive money involved with playing this game. So once they can get all of this sorted out, like all these small little steps, we can actually see like an upheaval in the player base.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Just quickly, you mentioned there, Blair, about the Mongolian PC cafes. That was a thing on Twitter this last week as well. Maybe quickly touch on that.
Yeah, I just saw this post which the Mongols guys made on their Facebook page where they said that the mayor of Ulaanbaatar, their capital, basically, he pushed out an edict last month or something where he was like, we're going to be shutting down all gaming cafes in the city, and the city basically is where the majority of the population, the urban population in Mongolia lives, right? Most of the other places are kind of rural places, and the tragedy is, apart from the Mongols and maybe I think. Born in Mongolia, one of these teams, I think they have their own gaming house, so to speak, or whatnot. But apart from that, the rest of the players, they don't play from their homes. They come over to these cafes to play. And trust me, man, I know quite a few of these guys. When it comes to these qualifiers, right, for the majors and DreamHack and whatnot, and just you find so many, like every 2 or 3 months, every time there's a new event, I find some new Mongolian prodigy coming out, right? Some machine gun or Zilkenberg like skilled player. We found Dobu come out from nowhere. He was an unknown. We have so many skilled players in that scene, and it just unfortunate that a very heavy-handed kind of a knee-jerk reaction from a politician could potentially just kill it for the scene. I think they have a lot of potential. These guys are hungry. They see, players like Machine Gun, Zilkenberg, Dobu, they've gone international. They're in China, living there, playing for some shady teams, but still playing, right? They're still earning money from playing Counter-Strike. I think that's a dream that many of these young players have, and they have the skill, they have the dedication, but, you snatch that opportunity away from them. I think it sucks. But then again, I also spoke to a couple of guys I knew in the scene, and they also said that even though it's a ruling, they still have doubts as to how it's going to be implemented, because that's some good news. Is like, I think they're mainly going to be cracking down on the gaming cafes, which also have gambling, like real life gambling and all involved. Some of the shady cafes, right? While some of the more mainstream ones might get away, maybe by greasing a few palms. I don't know, but I don't think it's all complete doom and gloom, but it is a fact that they are looking to kind of have a crackdown, so to speak, on all these gaming cafes.
I mean, there will almost probably be like some sort of loophole they can actually like abuse and still like keep most of these LAN cafes up and floating. Yeah.
Hopefully, yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting to me how Mongolian players have competed so well on the international stage, considering the limited resources they actually have. I mean, I come from a country that actually has, you'd say not much of a footprint internationally, but we have more resources than they do, and we don't do what they do. So. Right. For them to be shut down in this sort of way, I really hope that they find some way to keep going, because, for guys like you mentioned, Zilkenberg, Machine Gun, these sorts of guys showed up on the international stage. They were popping heads everywhere, and it's just we need more of that. Of course, some of them haven't kicked on, with joining Splice and not really doing anything, that sort of thing. But let's hope that we do see more of it, because there's clearly talent.
I mean, I'm just going to quote Red Eye here. Like I think he spoke to one of the manager of the Mongols at one of these events. I think it was ROG or something. And he's like, "How are you guys so good at CS?" And it's like, "We got fucking nothing else to do."
Yeah.
I mean, well, whatever it takes, man. I mean, if that's what the reason is, more power to you.
Absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about StarSeries, and particularly the Asian teams that are there. That would be Tyloo and VG Flash. Thoughts on this? I mean, VG Flash obviously haven't had such a good time of it, finishing pretty much dead last. They didn't really do too much. Tyloo, on the other hand, they look pretty impressive at times.
So I'm just going to approach this team base, right? So for VG Flash, it's, I think, their first proper international event, a big event as a unit, even though all these players have played, in various big tournaments in the past, right? I personally think it's one of the bigger events for Freeman, at least. But I personally think that VG Flash is going to be the best team in Asia in the near future, primarily because the language barrier is no longer there. I mean, there was this huge thing where these Chinese rogues are buying up, taking place like Kaze, Tyloo picking up Bentet and Excurate, for example, right? There's always going to be the language barrier, and it's going to be very hard to break that, especially when you're looking to compete against the best in the world, right? It might work against your local Asian teams. It's not going to it's not going to work against a Nico or Cold Zero just going off in your face, right? And we saw that when for Tyloo, I mean, great showing for them in IEM Sydney, right? And then they also had that upset win against Navi in their opening game. But if you saw saw them against NIP when, Forrest was starting to hit shots, and, NIP was kind of getting into the groove. Draken was, stepping up. Rez was, everyone's playing great for NIP. And you could kind of see the Tyloo kind of almost fell apart. It wasn't like they were doing anything crazy wrong. It's not like they were over-peaking anything, but the comms are off. It's really hard to try and communicate the idea that, hey, Forrest is right here. He's going to come and headshot you in like half a second. And you got to translate that from Mandarin to English, which none of them speak to a high level at all. Right. They're using English to communicate. None of them can speak English. It's not their first language, and none of their English is really that great. I think Xtremes and Benton have the best English. Let's be honest, it's still not that great, right? How are you functioning as a team? I don't get it.
If you're Benton, I mean, internally, you're Indonesian, right? You're translating this into possibly another language and then another language to even just get the communication out. That's insane. I mean, just think of the thought process. How long does it take you to form your words?
And it's top fragging as well, right? It's top fragging as well at the same time. Look, credit where it's due. These guys are really good players. I think all of them have a lot of potential. Bear in mind, they also played with AE, who's a stand-in. He's also a primary opera, so they had to kind of decide how he's going to fit in when you already have Xtremes opting in the team, right? So all these factors, considering all these factors, I mean, I don't really want to hate on them or anything. I think they have a lot of potential and whatnot, but I think they're going to peak at one point. They're going to be at a kind of plateau out and be like, all right, you can't go any higher than this unless this comm issue gets fixed, unless you get some sort of weird telepathic hive mind invention, like stuck inside your brain. That's the only way I see this team going above, because comms is probably one of the most important aspects of Counter-Strike. And if the language is going to stop it, the language barrier is going to stop it, I mean, how much more can you do, right? How much more can you do?
I mean, I don't know if you saw like the whole video that has been shared of like Tyloo practicing, or maybe even in a match. It was like insane. Like I tried to listen to it.
It was a script, like,
it was like they were screaming in Mandarin and then some English, and then they mix it up. It was like so confusing. So even I, who like I wasn't on the team, just like I'm just playing confused. Like what even is going on? Like are these guys speaking English? Or are they speaking Mandarin? It was crazy, but at the same time, it just like really raises like the value of Buntet, right? Because he's in-game leading 3 languages. He's also like top fragging almost in every single game. I really feel like his time on Tyloo is limited, right? Because it's only a matter of time before someone comes along and just like pays out the big check for him. But the question is, of course, who and when that happens.
Maybe an NA team.
And could also be the fact that I think Renegades could probably pick him up. I mean, I don't know who I'd remove from Renegades right now, but think about it, right? You have an Asian player, you can still pay for the Asian minor.
That's a really good point.
Yeah, but again, depends on if Tyloo's going to let him go, right? I've heard things about the Chinese orgs. They're like, nope.
Yeah, they have been.
Yeah, he's signed a statement.
Unreasonable.
Yeah. They're pretty unreasonable at times. It's almost like signing a contract with the devil, to be very honest. Right. I'm not just saying about Tyloo. I'm just saying like general Chinese org. I wouldn't sign any of those contracts, man. Like they probably own my soul, my family, my house, everything.
Your firstborn child. All of those sorts of things. Well, coming back to the Renegades and Ben 10 thing, I mean, obviously this isn't a real thing for you guys watching. We're just speculating. I'd say Yastillo is probably the one player who, if I look at Renegades, could be taken out. It's not necessarily a like for like exchange at all in terms of what those players do, but he's really the only one that I look at and go like, he's not really at the level of the other guys. And maybe I'm being unfair here, but I kind of have seen him as a weak link for a while. Do you think something like that would make them better?
I mean, I haven't watched enough Renegade matches like without Kassad, obviously, because that's when like Kassad left, and then when things kind of went off for them a bit. So since then, like I haven't been paying that close attention to their matches. Obviously, JKM has been performing out of his mind, so he's been like kind of like the best player in the past few weeks. But I can't really point a finger to like who to change right now, or if you even require a change, because before when they were with Kassad, like they were doing really well, right? They were beating some of the top teams. Like I think it was IM Sydney where they made like a very strong finish.
Yeah.
So I feel like there's more of a issue in the team of like there's not like a captain figure in the team right now, because obviously you got Nifty, talented guy, smart guy, but you need someone to pick out the cane and just woo past every now and then. That's what Kassad was doing. So we need someone like that back on the team right now.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I think the loss of Casas really affected them a lot. Like if you look at the performances earlier, right, they were looking really solid. I think both of you have very valid points, to be honest. Like yes, the loss of Casas has hurt them. At the same time, Estilo has struggled. He's been struggling for a while now, right? And even Nifty, right? I mean, yes, he had that insane performance in Sydney, but that's the thing with Nifty. He has these matches, these tournaments where he just goes on a tear. Like I think it was the
Yeah.
a couple of events here and there where he'll just go off, right? And then the rest of the times when it comes to like the online leagues or when it comes to smaller tournaments or even like in Star Ladder, for example, he's just very quiet. He's not like playing to the level he can. So yeah, apart from Jakem, who's really been pulling his own weight. Apart from that, rest of the team as a whole, I think have been pretty quiet. JK's had his moments. Oz has been pretty decent as well. He's really picked up in the past 1 year or so. But yeah, I think there are a lot of issues in the team overall. But just as a speculation, right? If they were looking to make a change and want to shake things up, I think Benta would be a good pickup. Apart from Jakem, I'd be and Nifty because he's the opper. I think he could replace any one of the other three players right now, just based on purely on current form.
Right.
Amazing skill there, and of course, if you do need a secondary caller, he could probably do it with a little bit of help, assuming the translation.
Just one language, just one language. I think he can pull it off. Yeah.
So finally, before we move on, I mean, we jumped around a little bit. We've done a little bit of Europe discussion here and a bit of Australia there too. But within Asia and particularly India for you, Bleh, this has got to be good news. The OpTic So Strong partnership and of course the announcement of the team as of yesterday at the time of recording.
Yeah, I think many people were confused why OpTic would just go for an Indian lineup. You already have the full Danish lineup, which is looking pretty solid, by the way. Although they got destroyed by Rogue, I think a few hours back. But keeping that aside, right? If you look at that team, that's great. So everyone's like, why in God's name would he go to India? But look at it from a marketing perspective, from a business perspective. India, 1.3 billion people. But there are people who play a lot of video games here. There are lots of Dota players, a lot of Counter-Strike players. Not much in League or StarCraft, but there are a lot of potential video gamers, right? And I think it's me being a cynic. I think it's just a matter of time where it kind of like explodes, where the esports becomes an actual thing, where people start paying, becoming paying customers, paying viewers, and whatnot. And for an org like OpTic to reach out here early on, before anything's really taken off, and kind of like have an Indian team be there when things are starting out, right? I think it's a very smart investment because bear in mind, it's way more cheaper to invest in India than any other, primary esports country. It's going to be a nightmare to get into China with all.
Africa's cheaper, I'm telling you.
No, I don't think so. But does it have 1.3 billion people? That's the question, right?
Well, that's probably more overall, but let's not talk individual countries. Nobody can beat you guys on that.
China can, but yeah. So I think from a pure business standpoint, I think it's a very smart move from OpTic. Like, what do you have to lose, right? You might lose a little bit of money, a little bit of investment here and there, but having the brand awareness, and I'm seeing right now like lots of if you look at some of the CS:GO Facebook groups in India and all these forums and all, everyone's like, oh, fuck yeah, OpTic, the green wall hashtag, all that shit, and that's great, right? If I was OpTic, I'd be like, yeah, we're getting something done here. And even the players who they got, right, they did a very good job in my opinion. They approached So Strong, where they were like, we want to actually pick up young players, and most of these players are young guys. They're not the old guard who really haven't achieved much. I'll be very blunt about it. And these are young, hungry guys. They're being given boot camp, coaching from outside, also being given a salary and whatnot. But here's the thing: the salary being given to these guys is not even close, not even a fraction of what's being paid to the main team or the international teams, right? So this is a win-win scenario for everyone. The 5 young guys have an opportunity. They have all the backing in the world. They can try and make something happen. At least contest in the Asian scene. Try and step out of the tier 8 to tier 9 level of Counter-Strike that my country's in, and do something about it. And for OpTic, I think they've already, it's a win-win, for the investment and what they can potentially get out of it. I think it's something which a lot of orgs are going to be doing in the upcoming couple of years. I think they're just the first org to do this.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just simply great. Like, if you know me, I'm an advocate for giving chances to young players. I'm always about that. And like you said, what people don't realize about this whole thing is that the cost of this whole project, like this team, is probably just like a fragment of what they actually pay to the Danish team, their main team. So it's really not like a huge investment which would like take up a considerable amount of money. And the thing is, like, if it pays off, like it pays off in a really good way, because this is in the same vein as, for example, an academy team. And like investing in unknown regions, you just have to look at what happened with Brazil, right? Like no one knew they were going to be this good. And then, some Plusha donated some money, ESEA donated some money. They could finally come over to play their tournaments and stuff. And it turns out that these guys are complete beasts. So if that happens, or if that whole thing like gets replicated here in the whole India project, then it's already like a winning deal, right? So it's already something good. And another thing is that if you come to think about it, like it's good that when you have these more serious investments into scenes which are not that well known yet. And what better organization or entity to come in than like a big organization like OpTic, because OpTic can provide these players with security, the necessary resources to become great. It's not like some small local organization picks these guys up and they have to like struggle and scrape for everything, like grind things out. Like they need to like make like donation streams in order to even make like other lands outside of India. So having a giant organization like OpTic backing these guys is already a great thing.
Yeah, and just to add to that, right? My last 2 cents would be the thing with the Indian scene. I've noticed this for a long time is the fact that there's a lot of nepotism involved, and you have all this old guard, right? Where they're like they're not really looking for new players to come up, and even if they do come up, like a 17, 18-year-old new guy who's very good, he starts playing with his old guys and he starts picking up bad habits, right? Like, playing Counter-Strike the wrong way. Because let's be honest, none of these guys have been playing it the right way because they haven't achieved anything. So, and there's a lack of esports organizations, like even the couple of teams who are paid. I've spoken to some of these owners and they have no freaking idea what to do. They just have money. They're like, I'm going to have an esports team and I'm going to make money out of it. I'm like, so what's your plan? Like, what's your marketing plan? What's your social media plan? They're like, we don't have any marketing. We don't have any social media. And so how are we going to make money out of it, right? They have no idea. And I've always felt that what was lacking in the Indian scene and even the Southeast Asian scene is these players you need to collect the best of the best among the young guys, put them in a job, not just 5 friends playing together. No, this is an actual job. You're getting paid to play. You're going to be under a contract. You're going to have everything, but you need to deliver. Once that comes in, once they realize that they have to deliver, to live this dream, I think that's when people are really going to step up. So I think overall, great move from OpTic.
Yeah, that's the goal. That's the goal.
The dream.
He's such a baller, though, Config. I love these sort of villain characters. We need more of them in CS:GO.
Yeah.
Absolutely, love him.
Adds a bit of spice. So moving over to EU, I've been casting lately something called the ESL Southeast Europe Championship. It's apparently season 7, and they say it's the longest running championship of its sort in the region. And it's interesting to me the level of these teams. There's not a hell of a lot of teamwork that I've seen so far from the majority of them, but the level of the aim and the individual skill is just ridiculous. There's been a couple of guys that I've looked at and thought, this guy could do pretty well in something like a MDL or ESEA Advanced or something like that. And it just seems to me like for such a geographically small region, there's a hell of a lot of good players from this region.
I mean, I'm inclined to agree. Like, that's the whole gist of like Southeast European countries and their Counter-Strike scenes. Like, you have some incredibly good aimers, but there's no one to like really show them the ropes and help them evolve and become like better players, more complete players. For example, in Hungary, that's something which happens a lot. And it's actually just like Bleh explained for the Indian scene. It's like you have like the old guard who, like, obviously, like you have some better achievements in Counter-Strike Source. Definitely Hungary was like doing really well. But since then, like, we haven't really achieved almost anything, right? Like, we made it out to some serious LAN tournaments. I mean, like smaller LAN tournaments, but that was it. Like, we bombed out of groups every time. So, and there isn't like a God-B figure in these scenes which can like take these players under his wing, show them how it's done, and help them become like turn that raw aim into something that can actually be used in a professional setting. Because right now, like, sure, raw aim can get you far in these smaller ESEA leagues, right? But other than that, once you get into a more serious team, you're already in like deep waters, right? And that's where, for example, if you look at that Fox, he might not be like the best aimer in the Hungarian scene, right? When it comes to like pure fragging talent, there are probably some players who actually outrank him in that regard. But that Fox, he's actually a more complete player. He knows like the nades, he knows how to play in a team environment, and that is what is sorely lacking in the Southeast European countries right now. Like, the players, I feel like they still lack that actual tutelage from like the old guard, which can actually help them and become more complete players.
It's actually interesting to me what both of you have said about the old guard and the way new players get approached. We have the same issue in South Africa, actually, and probably some guys who are watching this won't like me for acknowledging it, but it's an endemic thing, I think, to Counter-Strike around the world in the smaller scenes. Because you're more insular, you're smaller, and therefore everybody knows everybody. It has this sort of thing of, well, if you're young and you're good, you're either cheating or you're bullshit, and when you do eventually, as a young player, break through that and get to a good team, again, you're getting information from guys who haven't necessarily achieved on the level that you maybe could, with your skill and your ability. So, I mean, that's not an indictment on those guys. A lot of those, the more senior players, they've probably hit the peak that they can within, their scene, whether it be South Africa or India or Southeast Asia, Southeast Europe, that sort of thing. But it does seem to be this mentality amongst Counter-Strike players of, there's this sort of old boys club where the guys looking after the game in our country, and, you got to go through us to get somewhere. And it just seems so counterproductive, but still at the same time, to my mind,
it's very dangerous, actually, because it's like a devilish circle. So in order to break out of these scenes, you actually have to like move out and play in an international mix. Like that's like the only way you can actually get noticed. That's how Dead Fox got noticed. That's how all these Eastern European players got noticed. Like apart from the Polish scene, is that they went to play in these big international mix teams, and that in turn like takes these players out of their local scenes, which just like drops the quality of the Counter-Strike already played there, because all of your good players are getting moved out to international teams. And so what happens then is that your local scene just like there's no one left to really help these players and build like a national team which can actually compete. So that's what's dangerous, because once these players are out of the scene, they're not coming back. They already have that sweet paycheck, they already have that great international fan base. They're not coming back.
Yeah, very good point. It's sort of a damned if you do, damned if you don't catch-22 kind of thing. You got to leave to get better, but if you leave, then everybody else gets worse. And this is sort of what we've seen in South Africa with Bravado Gaming moving to North America recently. That's sort of created a gap there, but we'll talk about that in a minute, I think. In EU as well, I've covered a fair bit of ESEA this season as well, and Valiant & Co and the Imperial, which is quite interesting to see how well they did in other tournaments, because covering them in ESEA, you could see they certainly had some skill and obviously a little bit more tactical depth than the guys that they were playing against in that championship. And when they showed up against guys like North, they did some work, just falling short really, like in things like DreamHack Marseille, shall we say, where things didn't go so well. But it again points to a tremendous amount of, shall we say, player capital in the area.
Yeah, but like just to touch upon what Draulon said, right? Like if you look at Imperial, if you look at the players they have, you have Nuki, they got Nexa, ex-Renegades, and you had, I think Crystal was calling for them, Tensky, Esperanto. I mean, these are players who are going to get picked up eventually, right? Pretty soon, right? That's a tragedy.
So if you're those players, that's what you want. You don't want to stay there.
Yeah. Indeed. So I don't see like Imperial going like really far with this particular lineup, right? And I think that's the objective for most of these players. Esperanto, he's going to be where's he from again? I think he's from Lithuania or something, right? Yep. And for him, from a scene where, let's be honest, we don't know any like great teams from Lithuania. So for him to get picked up by, I don't know, maybe a Mouse Sports like organization or a similar team, right? That's what he would be looking for. I don't think he's going to say no to that. So teams like Valiant, teams like Imperial, like these are the teams I look at as examples of teams who allow more unknown talents, like from the more obscure parts of Europe to, or could be other parts of the world as well, to kind of like show, ply to trade and show what they have, and make things, and kind of like see where these individual players go from there, which big teams they join up, which teams pick them up. And I think from that perspective, I think these teams have been doing a pretty good job. They're dangerous teams. These are teams who can upset your, the teams in the lower parts of tier 1, who are kind of like, oscillating in tier 1 and tier 2, like your Hellraisers, for example, right? They are pretty dangerous teams right now.
I mean, like you said, like this team was never going to be like a permanent thing, because if you look at the players here, it does look like a team of rejects in a sense, and that's not a bad thing, right? Because there's always going to be some players who got unlucky due to circumstances beyond their control in like roster shuffles. They got left out, or they just didn't have a spot in the team. So these players like clamping together and playing together and hoping to get lucky in the next big roster shuffle is the best thing they can do. Like if you think about the old OpTic lineup with like Magisk, Freiburg, HS, I think Alu was also there. So these guys, when they were also like the kind of like the team of rejects after the first after the big roster shuffle. Yeah. And what happened after that was like the next roster shuffle came around and all of these players found a better team to play in. So that's kind of like the play here for Imperial. Right now they lack a fifth. Obviously Asilion leaving the team. I'm not sure what the story there was exactly, but I think he was their caller. Like he was always like the in-game leader figure in like the Danish teams as well he played for. So right now it's like the team has to decide right now like which way are they going with this. Like are they going to continue finding a fifth, trying to like build out an actual structured team, or are they just like waiting for the big opportunity to come along and for someone to pick them up?
Well, if I look at both of these teams, I got to say, like from a player capital point of view, Valiance has probably gone as far as they can go with what they have, in the sense that all of their players are sort of over 22, 23, 24, 25. But they're already quite old to, I mean, no disrespect to them, because of course there isn't supposed to be an age gap theoretically or an age limit theoretically if you look at some of the players that do well still in their late 20s, but still they're probably a little old to be that sort of young star in another international team. I mean, Impulse is a great player. I really enjoyed watching him this season, but he's already 22. I mean, he's older than other players who've been the best player in the world for 3 years. So it's hard to see somebody like that making the transition. On the other hand, if you look at the Imperial players, Esperanto and Yuki, they're young. They could move on to really good international lineups, maybe be like a ROPS style character in a similar team to Mousesports. And actually, to me, what boggles my mind about these international teams is we have two very good examples of teams that are extremely good as international teams, and then there's quite a big gap between the FaZe and the Mousesports of this world to the next guys. I mean, you could say Hellraisers are to a degree, but not entirely. I think there's got to be more of these sorts of lineups coming in the future.
I mean, it's hard to find the mix of players coming from like different cultures and stuff which actually mesh correctly, because it's not only like you have to keep in mind like the playstyle differences and get that to work, but you also have to accommodate for cultural differences, for like different set of mindsets. And like we have seen like teams, international mixed teams, which have fallen apart, especially due to this, because like the players just couldn't get along, they couldn't be on the same page. So that's like the dangerous part of these these mixed teams, is that not only do you have to find players which like the playstyle works, which will just click within the team as well, because chemistry is also a very important part of team play as well.
Absolutely. We got the example of Simple from 2 years ago in Liquid as to how to not fit in, basically. But he's come on amazingly. I mean, he seems like a mature professional these days. And if you go back and watch 3 years ago, he was scamming kids for their skins. So it's quite amazing how these things could change. Thank God our esport is not Overwatch. Otherwise, he would have never gotten to play. Right?
Oh, yeah. God damn.
Yeah. Okay, we won't go there. We won't shit on Overwatch too much. StarSeries Season 5, we were talking a little bit about Tyloo and VG Flash. Let's talk about some of the lesser-known European teams there as well.
Yeah, I think it was... I think the biggest surprise, I think the one team we got to talk about is AGO, right? AGO, as supposedly it's how it's pronounced, right? Like most people, I think they're by de facto the best Polish team right now.
Yeah.
They are definitely better than VP, at least based on the results.
What
impresses me... Yeah, that's also not hard, to be honest. I feel bad for those guys, man. I love the
AGO are legitimately good, though.
Yes, that's the thing. Well, what I like about this team is the fact that it's not about any star players, right? I mean, like, sure, they have some pretty good players, like, Furlan's been there for a while. He's a pretty solid player as well, and all these guys. But it's not about the star performances coming out. Yes, they do have the individual moments, but the way they play, it's some very fundamental, basic, solid Counter-Strike. It's like, I love watching them on maps like Train, for example, right? It's a map where even if you look at top tier teams, they kind of like spread out and sometimes have this tendency to go for an individual place. Let's say you lose your first man, you're a 4v5, you're a man down, even some of the top tier teams would probably go for an individual play to try and get a trade, try and equalize things out. This team never does that. They will always group up together, go for, well-placed executes, working in pairs. The trade game is on point. Like this is the best example for me of how a team of no star players can really go for deep runs in tournaments and beat favorites just by playing Counter-Strike the way it's supposed to be played. And I think that's why I love these guys the most.
Yeah, I mean, when I look at AGO or AGO, this is obviously a team which is like Vega Squadron, right? Yep. So there you have some pretty talented players, obviously, like no superstars, but players who they can frag out if required. You have some older, more experienced players, and then you have the young guns, and they mesh together really well in a style of Counter-Strike, which is really about playing off each other's strengths, and that's the reason why they are so successful. Like Bleh said, it's just it's all about knowing each other and creating that perfect teamwork and chemistry, which can allow them to excel. The only problem is that obviously the question is how long will they stay together? Because right now, of course, they are winning, things are groovy, but I feel like it's only a matter of time before the Virtus Pro agent comes knocking on the door with the 20K paycheck, and it's like you can't refuse that kind of money, right? Like even if you have a team that's working, you guys are like having a good time, you're winning. Even then, you have to be insane to refuse that kind of money. So if that happens, that's where I feel like the whole downtrend of this team will start. Hopefully, even if they take away one of their better players, they will find someone to replace him and just kind of keep this level that they are at. But that's what this team needs to watch out for. So that's where I feel like things can go really wrong.
Or it could be VP just comes up and hey, you want to buy an entire team?
That'd probably be easier.
That'd be easier. I think that'd be a better move than picking up a player and then hoping that let's say they pick up Snatchy or PHR Fair or whoever, right? Snatchy, I think, is the guy who's been standing out the most recently. Yeah. He looks really sharp as well, right?
Very similar to Snacks. He's just a lot thinner. Do you think they can just swap him out?
He's almost like if Neo and Snacks had a child, it kind of looks like he's got that little bit of a beard as well, right? But yeah, I would if I was VP, I'd rather buy the entire team and just instead of just picking a player and putting him in, replacing Mihu or whoever or Neo or whoever, and just hoping it clicks, right? Because right now, let's be honest, no one knows what the hell's going on with VP. I don't think VP knows what the hell's going on with that team, right? And when you have heavy hitters like Snacks, Bialy, I mean, you know what these guys can do. You know how good they can be. So you don't want to really kick them either. You're like, okay, maybe tomorrow he's going to start dropping 40 bombs against the FaZe or whatnot. So you don't want to kick them either. So I think, I agree with Draulon that, VP would be looking to pick up a player, maybe a Snatchy, maybe Grubby, maybe Grubby or Furlan. I think it's Furlan is calling right now for Ego, right? So they might pick up Furlan and be like, hey, you can be in-game leader. I think it would be tragic for Ego because I really want to see how far this team can go. I want to see them plateau out. I want to see are they going to be a potential top 6 team in the world? It's still a stretch, but I think they can easily be a top 10 team. I think they're close to being a top 10 team just with this recent performance, if you ask me.
Already,
I mean, they just keep improving almost every tournament they attend. Yes. So it's always better and better results. At the beginning, they were at the smaller ESEA lands, then they started qualifying for the big ones, and now here they are, and just beating Mouse Sports and I think NIP as well.
Over NIP. That's crazy.
You can't fuck with those results. That's legit. Those are best of 3 wins against some of the better teams in the world.
Yeah, they have looked really good, and the legitimacy of the results as well. Because often at these sorts of tournaments, we rewind to the Boston Major, for instance, some of the wins that guys like Vegas Squadron and Avangard got, you look at it and go, well, who gives a fuck? It's just,
that's true.
Teams that it's not noteworthy wins, and I think noteworthy wins are what necessarily raise your stock as a team and as individual players. And to beat Mouse Sports, to beat NIP, that is legitimate. It's not just a flash in the pan. Of course, beating Virtus Pro, again, that's not so hard right now anymore. But if it had been that they'd say beaten, I don't know, Avangard and Tai Lu or something like that, it may not have necessarily had that much cash to it. Tai Lu maybe, but we know, of course, they're not that consistent. But the fact that it's these 2 opponents, and particularly Mouse Sports, I mean, Mouse Sports have consistently been a top 3 team this year. To beat them in a best of 3 and also to beat them in that way, rather than it just being an off day or something like that for Mouse Sports, you actually ground out a a 2-1 win. So it was legitimate pushback that you got from your opponents. You didn't catch them off. You actually did what was required to get past them with fundamental Counter-Strike.
Yeah, absolutely, right. And like you mentioned, when you're talking about teams like a Vega Squadron, like Avantgarde and all these guys, right? The fact that these QBF famously, the fact that these guys are, depending on the format of the tournament, I'm looking at the majors, right, and looking at like the Swiss system, best of one Swiss systems, whatnot, and all these where best of ones are common. Yes, they do have the surprise factor where they can pull off upset wins. They won't pull off upset wins against the likes of an Astralis, for example, because Astralis have a structure which is just incredible, right? But against a more puggish team, against a team who might be coming in a little bit, there's a team which is a little slow to start, for example, like SK, for example, these are teams who can pull off upsets, but I don't really see them making deep runs in any tournament where, they don't have to win just two best of one to get to the playoffs. Right, I don't see them getting into the playoffs for a Star Ladder, for example, and that's the thing with most of these Eastern European teams. The fact that they're so inconsistent, and that's where AGO stands out. The fact that they have been on a upward trajectory in the past few months, they've just been impressing me. And I think whichever event they're going to be playing next, I think it might be DreamHack Open or something. They might actually reach the finals or even beat the likes of a North or a Hellraisers coming soon.
Well, those teams are up for the taking, of course, at the moment, particularly North, as we know. So I think Ego could do some work there. Of course, for us, we're slightly running out of time here, so I think we'll cut a few topics this week. We did mention something about Australia, at least, so we'll jump to them in a future week. And, of course, there's also in South America the ESL 1 Belo Horizonte coming up as well, but that's not right now, so maybe we can cover that in the future. Let me quickly do some Africa stuff, because of course I'm from Africa, so we'll go to the things that you guys don't know anything about. No, well, maybe you do. We recently actually had FACEIT introduced in South Africa as of 2 weeks ago, so that's been really good to incentivize players to get better, because we've had ESEA here for a while, but local players didn't really take to it, which is, the tournaments still happen, but the sort of rank S style thing, no. People were not into it at all. And I'm just wondering, from your side, Bleh, like pickup systems like this, are they successful in India?
Yeah, I mean, they are, but again, it depends on the platform, right? I actually have a question for you, which will probably help me answer my question a little easier. Like, do you think the reason like ESC didn't take off was the fact that they have that premium pricing where you have to pay to play, while FACEIT is free, and yeah, of course, if you want to play premium, you can pay for it, but you can still play on the platform for free. Do you think that really factors in when it comes to South Africa or Africa in general?
It really does. We already had a couple platforms here before ESEA that were free, so you're already facing an uphill battle against something that has local support. There's a local developer sitting here going, well, your platform does this, well, mine can do it now too, because I'm here and I can move quickly. Whereas ESEA is a big company, they're not going to change their platform to compete with a local provider. So yeah, I'd say the pricing thing was there. They did drop the pricing locally and try to incentivize it, but I actually think the thing that makes a big difference is with FACEIT's introduction here, they're partnered with this company called Southern Lions. It sounds like a horrible lisp, but that's actually what it is. I don't know why they went with that branding, but they have like an FPL style system where you're incentivized with FACEIT points and actual cash prizes for performing well in the three sort of tiers of the pugging system. So that, I think, has made a big difference, because players look at it and go like, hey, I can grind away, I can get better, I can sort of get into this elite group of players if I get into the top sort of gold league, and I can get paid for it. So I think that's a huge incentive to people here anyway. And so far they've had to double their server capacity in the first week. So that's encouraging. Good. In case you guys don't know, in South Africa there's about 90,000 unique Counter-Strike players every month. So there's quite a lot, considering population. It's actually not that big, and of course access to internet and computers and things like that isn't great in a country with 26% unemployment. So it's going to always mean that we're facing somewhat of an uphill battle, but it's looking pretty good from a FACEIT point of view. I just hope that they continue, because ESEA looked very positive. We had Bravado qualify through the first season of ESEA here to go to MDL in was it January 2017, where they actually beat who was it, TSM, but they were already disbanding, so it's not exactly the most legitimate result. But that possibility's sort of been taken away. So in the interim, what we've had now is Bravado Gaming have actually gotten their sponsors together. They're sponsored by Dell and Alienware and all of that, and Intel. So they got them together, got the money together to send the team over to North America, and they've been based there since February and have so far qualified to MDL from ESEA main. That's probably the great hope of South African Counter-Strike right now. Like how
it's a Renegade story all over again.
Exactly, right? A Renegades or.
Yeah.
I'm sure in their internal sort of narrative, they want it to be an SK story rather than a Renegade story, but I'm not so sure that's likely. But unfortunately for Bravado, they hold some really dubious records, like the least rounds ever won at a major at DreamHack 2014, which is an embarrassing record, and I'm probably in trouble again for mentioning it. But that's something to push past, because that kind of performance, when you're absolutely dominant in your home market and you go somewhere else and you get just wrecked every time. I mean, they were yeah.
I mean, it happened to SK as well, right? They got 16-0 by Fnatic, and then see what they did after that, right? So yeah. I think you just got to let go of that. But yeah, just to like answer your question, which you mentioned, right? Like how it is in India, how it is in Asia is the fact that it's a massive place. Even if you take China out of the picture, because China has a great wall, with the Great Firewall and all that. Networking is a nightmare when it comes to Asia, because it's obviously the biggest continent, the massive population, and there's so many different ISPs and network providers that if you're playing in Malaysia and there's a server in Singapore, it's literally like 2 or 3 hours drive by a car, from that country to Singapore, and you'll still get 300 ping to one of their server providers. Yeah, because it just routes into Russia or some shit, right? And it's really messy that way. And the thing with Faceit and ESEA, both of them, would be, I think Faceit's model works better for Asia because it's free to play, right? And then you can kind of like have the premium option required. That's what SoStrong does as well. It's free to play. And India has a pretty good user base when it comes to SoStrong. Decent in Faceit, negligible in ESEA, primarily because of the servers, right? You need to know the region, the infrastructure of Asia, India, and whatnot, in order to put up the right servers and the right nodes where everyone has an opportunity to play. And I don't want to diss on Faceit or ESEA, but they have bigger things on their plate, right? They need to grow the EU user base. They need to grow the NA user base. Well, when it comes to Asia, they're like, Singapore is kind of like the most common location. Let's put a server over there. It doesn't quite work out. Like Mongolia,
120 ping.
120 ping from Mongolia. The Singaporean guys have 5 ping or like single digit ping. And then you expect, I've seen so many qualifiers happen where some of the Dubai guys had to play in the Singapore server against someone from Hong Kong for a major slot, right? For a major qualifier slot, for an Asia minor, sorry. I mean, both one team is 150 ping, other team is 200 ping. I'm like, it's kind of bullshit, doesn't work. But I think that's the challenges with the infrastructure overall. And whichever company would be looking to really invest into the Asian Oceanic region, right? They need to put in the research, respect the fact that there is a scene there, listen to them and try and fix it. I think one small little quibble I had with Faceit's, the qualifiers was the oceanic seeding, right? I mean, I think they did a very good job. I mean, compared to the previous Asian minor where there was no Asian qualifier, which E-League did, I think Faceit did a great job overall. But small little things like Greyhound Gaming and Tainted Minds, the two best teams in my books right now in Australia, facing off in the best of 1 early in the bracket, shouldn't have happened, right? And it hurts you as well. You want to see these two teams play in the finals, in a best of 3, have a really close game, have that storyline, and the best team goes through. I think it went to overtime. The Tainted Minds won that game in 1917, and then they just stomped everyone else. I think it was like 64 rounds won and 1 round loss for Tainted Minds, right? That's ridiculous. That should be happening.
Yeah, that's a failure, unfortunately. But talking about minors, of course, for Africa, the issue is we don't have anything like that at all.
Oh yeah, you guys don't, right? Holy shit!
So that's really where it requires our teams to relocate to do this. So, for instance, the North African teams, we had the ESL African Championship last year, where it was actually North Africa and South Africa competing, and then LAN finals, where the top 2 qualifiers from both championships sort of faced off. And what was really apparent with the guys in North Africa is they play in Europe generally. They tend to be playing with in the French scene quite a lot. So you'll see guys from Algeria and Egypt. They speak French. They tend to go over to France to actually study as well. We had one of the guys on the panel for the broadcast from Algeria as well, and he was explaining some of it to us. And I mean, we in South Africa, we're really, really isolated because we're so far away from the rest of the African scene, so to speak, in the north. They at least have that access. Down here, we're sort of the next thing past us is the South Pole. So it's just there's sea and then there's the South Pole, and in between us is this massive landmass. So for us, the internet connectivity to the, or shall I say the routing to the rest of Africa is even challenging, because if you think, Asia's got issues with this. I mean, there's countries in Africa that don't even have a government. So it's like, how are we going to play CS with these people? It's crazy. We are seeing changes though. For instance, Kenya now has better ping to South Africa than South Africa has to South Africa. So it's quite crazy, and they're really far away because the infrastructure has been put in. There's also a new undersea cable going to South America, which will actually give us better ping to North America through the South American cable than we currently have, because right now it's actually routed through Europe then to North America. So there are changes. The world is changing. Technology is advancing it forward. But unfortunately for us, we're still super isolated. So that's why we kind of rely on our teams going overseas to attempt to compete. And as I said, inevitably they get wrecked. So we used to actually have a rivalry with Space Soldiers, would you believe? Bravado and Space Soldiers were at a similar level 2 years ago. And then you can see Space Soldiers have continued to compete after obviously wrecking Bravado the final time they played, and they've never been at a similar level again. And for us, it's just really about getting this exposure, getting the opportunity to play these guys and do it consistently. So the fact that they're in America, I wish them all the best, and I hope they do well. I'm not so sure that they're necessarily going to qualify for Pro League or something like that, but maybe with some lineup changes. But maybe we'll talk about that in the future. They do have one player, though, a guy called Sonic, who you've probably seen Pitar talk about quite a bit from HLTV. He is exceedingly talented. He's kind of like a I don't know how to describe him. He's almost like the style of play is like a Cold Zero in the sense that he's not overly aggressive, but he just stays alive and gets 2 or 3 frags every round, no matter what. So it's he's obviously being set up in the team as well, but that's the kind of player I'd like to see being picked up by a better team in North America.
Whatever happened to Black Poison?
He's actually still here. He's involved with Face It, funny enough, which
okay.
And ESEA. That seems weird, but that's the truth. His team, Energy Esports, is actually better than Bravado in the latter part of last year. They won all the LAN titles, and as far as I gather, they're looking to also to make the move. I'd actually say between the two teams, Energy are in a better position to do well internationally because they're more about structure and a tactical approach. Where Bravado, being the team that tended to stomp people locally, would be the sort of skill-based team. And unfortunately, if you're skill-based in a small scene, you go over to the big wide world, everybody's got more skill than you do. So you can't necessarily do that. So things could change in the next couple of, I'd say probably 3 or 4 months if Energy do go over. But in the meantime, it's really about what's happening locally, and there's a lot happening locally in the CS:GO. It's just it doesn't necessarily translate to anything the international audience would necessarily care about.
I mean, circling back to the whole FPL thing a little bit, and Face moving into South Africa, like when they opened up these hubs and the local pro leagues here in Europe, like it actually did wonders for these teams, because you got to see all these new players coming out and actually seeing who they are, seeing what they can do. And Faces is actually like the whole mission statement there for like FPL is helping like these new players come out and give them a place to improve and compete with some of the best in the world. And you just look at, like, for example, like Faces Mikey's posts on Reddit. You can say it's all PR, but no, like Faces really do take the extra mile for like these players to have a good place to compete, right? Because that is what brings them good business in the end. And Faces like taking that system over to South Africa, like it can only mean good things for the scene, because you actually have like a proper like league where the newer players can come in and show themselves. But the only problem with South Africa is, like you said, it's like you guys are so cut off from the rest of the world, is that you can't really properly gauge like how your teams like match up with the other teams in the world. Because when Bravado, they moved over to North America, it's like a lot of my colleagues came over to me and asked me like, how good are these guys? Like, will they actually stand a chance now tonight? Like, I actually have like no clue, because they had like the occasional international LAN appearance, but those were with different rosters, different players, for example. And the only results which I can really look at when it comes to bravado is like how they match up against local teams, and that isn't saying much at an international level.
No, not at
So
all.
like my guess was like they are probably around like the level of like a luminosity level team. Like they can probably take down some of the teams in North America, get their ass beat sometimes, but it's all fair trade over there, and that's pretty much like what I saw. Like they lost to some like MDL level teams. They beat Renegades, I believe, in was some kind of a qualifier. So they've been doing all right. But I feel like the point of these North American like moving out to North America is like, first of all, you have like a lot higher skill level to compete against. Like you can actually learn, because if you compete with the same teams for the same players for a while, it just like it just gets boring, right? You don't evolve. You start picking up bad habits. Like for example, if you remember like the old Cloud9 iBuyPower rivalry back in North America, like those guys weren't doing anything actually productive in those scrims. Like they're just like pushing against each other, just like doing silly plays,
Trying
like
to embarrass each other.
yeah, that's it. So like if you're not moving out of your local scene, like you're not going to improve, and that's why this move to North America is very important, because they actually have the opportunity to play some of against the likes of, for example, Cloud9 or an SK Gaming, which can really like point out their mistakes and show them what needs to be fixed. And another thing about like moving to North America is I talked a lot about this to one of my friends, ANJ from the Danish scene, because he went out to play in NRG for a while, and I was like, it's great that you take this opportunity, because not only does it give you the opportunity to play against some of the top teams in the world, but also gives you insane publicity, because like North America is all about like, like watching your favorite teams play and then just like cheering for them. Just think about like the arenas filled in North America, like the RS USA, Cloud9, Team Liquid, like these are the chants, right? So you gain massive publicity from even playing in like an MDL level league in North America. Like that really raises your following. People figure out, they find out who you are, and that publicity helps you. That's leverage to get like better offers from other teams, to get picked up by another North American team and stuff like that. So in the end, this is actually not only good for the players at a gameplay level, but also like at a business standpoint, because they actually have like a lot more leverage to go off and move up in the whole Counter-Strike scene.
Absolutely. Well, I think for Africa in general, we're probably in a position that's a few years behind where Asia is right now, actually, in terms of development. We still need to catch up with internet infrastructure, things like that, and obviously interest. But guys like ESL, for instance, coming in with ESL Africa last year, maybe they do something this year, maybe they don't. I don't actually know at this stage, but those sorts of things do also help raise the public profile, because people can see it on TV, that sort of thing as well, aside from just obviously watching on Twitch or whatever. So I think it's pretty bright for Africa. In the business world, Africa is kind of seen as this as the next great frontier, and right now I think in Counter-Strike the next great frontier is the Asian region. That's where some teams are potentially going to come through and be hugely competitive. South Africa and Africa in general is probably a year or two behind that, maybe.
Yeah, still in a few years,
I think we can still, like, if Asia clicks, right, if it works out, like if, we start having your Tylus, your VG Gamings, and, seeing like the NDO team, for example, right, when that comes to fruition, and if you see these teams performing and things starting to click and the scene starting to grow better, I think that's something which could hasten South Africa or Africa's growth as well. I think there are a lot of similarities in these two places. Yes, Asia has a bigger population and whatnot, but I think there's a lot of similarities, for Africa, you could kind of like avoid what Asia did for a number of years, which really didn't result in anything, and try and pick up what really worked out. Like if this NDO exercise works out, for example, right, that's something that could be replicated in Africa and whatnot. So I think it goes very hand in hand. If Asia rises, I'm sure the other regions, like, some of the more forgotten parts of South America, for example, right? We only talk about Brazil. We don't really talk about Argentina and all these places. They have some pretty talented players as well, I'm quite sure, right? And likewise in Africa as well. So yeah, I think Forgotten Realms, I think everything goes hand in hand, so to speak, right?
Yeah, next time we need to talk about Uruguay and Paraguay and Colombia and things like that. I'm going to have to do some research, man.
Get some people, call some people, find an expert. Hope he speaks English. And,
that's it too. I wanted to get some North African guys on here, actually, and it turns out most of them don't speak English, so couldn't do that. They could speak French, but I don't speak French, so, no luck. What can you do? I think that's it for us this week, guys. We've covered a fair bit and had a pretty good discussion. I hope you guys enjoyed it.
Yep.
Both of you and of course the people watching as well. So, any final thoughts, final words, or anything?
Nothing. I mean, I think it was a great podcast overall. Firstly, thank you for having me. And I think this is something which was kind of missing, which is kind of missing where we kind of talk about, let's be honest, there's so many podcasts out there talking about, tier 1, Counter-Strike and whatnot. And that's great. That's obvious. You want to talk about the best out there. But at the same time, I'm sure there is an audience for scenes like the Asian scene, like some of the Balkan states, for example, right? Some of the African scene, the Australian scene, for example. So I think great to you, Extremes, great initiative, so to speak.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
I share the same sentiments, right? So it's always nice to hear about the scenes which they aren't doing that well, or they're still at the wild frontier right now. And for these, for these scenes, there's no actual correct opinion on how to fix them, right? So it's great to hear all these different versions, these different ideas of what we're supposed to do. So that's always interesting because one of them is bound to be right, and or at least close to what should be done. So it's always great to hear, how people see the future unfolding in these scenes.
Well, I'd absolutely agree with both of you guys. So I think that's our show for this week, guys. This has been Forgotten Realms, the CSGO podcast. I've been Extremes, Draulon with me, Bleh with me as well. Go follow us on Twitter. You can see our Twitter handles all the way at the bottom. So make sure you do follow us. And if you disagree with us, we don't care. No, actually, we do. So we're always happy to talk. We appreciate you guys watching. We'll catch you in the next one. Cheers.